What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you a discussion on the brand new Bearcti Archetype. I don't know how the hell you're supposed to pronounce this. That's set to release in the next deck building set, Ancient Guardians. Now, this archetype, I think Konami was on some hallucinogenic drugs when they came up with this one. It's like polar bears in mech suits in space. They've been very creative with their archetypes as of late, which to be fair, I guess is a good thing. And I'm really excited to see what potential this archetype has. Remember, when we get these deck building sets, we've had archetypes like Adamantipator, Eldritch, Sky Striker come out of these sort of sets, so it's not unrealistic to think that these sort of archetypes might have some tier 1 potential. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. You can see right here, this is how it's spelled, and I still have no way of knowing how to pronounce this. It's bear, but then like Bearcti, but then I think of like cacti because I live in a desert, so that's naturally what I think of first. So Bearcti, you guys can let me know down in the comments. I'm sure that's going to cause a huge fight. The thing is, if there was ever a time when they changed the names from the OCG to the TCG that it's actually welcome, I think this might be one of them. But let's go ahead and scroll right on down. The new theme, Bearcti special summons synchro monsters by looking at the difference in levels. Oh, interesting. So is this some sort of like new way to synchro summon? I guess we'll find out when we get there. Let's go ahead and start with the first one here. This is Bearcti or Bearcti. I have no idea how to pronounce it. Mikpola, a level 7 water beast effect monster, 700 attack, 2000 defense. You can only use each of this card's name's first and second effects once per turn. During the main phase, as a quick effect, you can tribute one other level 7 or higher monster in your hand, special summon this card from your hand. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn, except monsters that have a level. Interesting. Okay, so that means that you can't summon Xyz monsters, and you can't summon Link monsters. Now, note here that it says for the rest of this turn, so you could potentially still play some Link monsters as long as you do those plays before you start special summoning these Bearcti monsters. So that's actually really important, because if it were something like, let's say, Pot of Duality, where it completely restricts you from special summoning for the duration of the turn, regardless of when you activate the card, then that would matter quite a bit. Will that come up? I don't know, but it is just something to note. Second effect, if this card is special summoned, you can add one Bearcti monster from your deck to your hand, except Bearcti Mikpola. Okay, so in terms of card advantage, you have to tribute a card from your hand to summon this to the field, but then it gets you another card, so it effectively just goes even, right? Because you're losing a card, but then gaining a card, and then the monster is just moving from your hand to the field. It's also, if it's special summoned, it doesn't have to be special summoned via its own effect, and that's pretty important if there is a way to special summon these guys out through other means, that it doesn't have to be just solely through their own effect. Okay, well, there's your searcher. Next up is Bearcti Mictanis. So it's a level 7 water beast effect monster, 700 attack, 1700 defense. Wow, the stats on these are like really not that great. You can only use each effect once per turn. During the main phase quick effect, you contribute one other level 7 or higher monster in your hand. Special summon this card from your field or from your hand. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn, except monsters that have a level. It seems like they're all going to have this clause, so if I see this again, I'm just going to skip over it, but interesting. Then, if this card is special summoned, you can target a Bearcti monster in your graveyard, except Mictanis, add it to your hand. So, similar to this one, it also breaks even in advantage because you're able to then get any card back to your hand. You can even get the card back to your hand that you tributed off to be able to summon this in the first place. So you really don't lose any advantage summoning either of these. It's just a way to get them onto the field. Next up is Bearcti Micbilis. So level 7 water beast, 700 attack, 1400 defense. Again, these stats are just so lackluster. You can only use each effect once per turn. During the main phase quick effect. Okay, so all of these seem to have this clause. What's also interesting that I overlooked, these are all quick effects. So you can actually use these during your opponent's turn. And what's nuts about that is, let's say you just have something like Mikpola. When your opponent goes to the end of their turn, like whatever their turn 1 play may be, before they go to the end phase, you could actually, similarly to how people used to do with Gizmek Orochi, you could actually just summon this out to the field, assuming you have the means to summon it, and just already get a body on the field on your turn 0. And that way, if you get another Mikpola somehow, you can then get another one of them out and not have to waste that. So the fact that these are quick effects is pretty good, but there hasn't really been a reason to otherwise, besides getting the body out. These don't like interact with your opponent, at least as of yet. So it's just interesting that you could potentially do that. The second effect of McBillis, though, if this card's special summon, you can special summon a Bearcti monster from your hand except Bearcti McBillis. So this one doesn't really get you any advantage, but it allows you to summon multiple of these onto the field, which could potentially matter if this is a synchro-oriented deck. That's perfectly fine. At the very least, these cards can also act as like blockers. So if your opponent's trying to go for game, you could special summon these before they go to the battle phase. Yeah, they might be able to do something to kill them before they actually go to battle phase, but still interesting nonetheless. Okay, so it looks like we have a level 8 now, Bearcti Megapola. So it is a level 8 Water Beast Warrior tuner effect monster. Interesting. 2500 attack, 700 defense. I like this because this actually has some stats to it. You can only use each effect once per turn. During the main phase, quick effect. Okay, so it's the same clause as before. So it's good that it's still with level 7, so it doesn't have to be like a level 8 to get this out. So you can still use all the previous cards to summon this one. That's good. If this card is special summoned while you control another Bearcti monster, you can target one spell and trap your opponent controls, destroy it. Okay, so now we have some cards that are going to actually disrupt the opponent. Now, does this really matter? I would say maybe not. It depends on the type of card your opponent is playing, right? Because if they have a card that's like a continuous sort of effect, then this card could actually come down and destroy it before that effect might actually be able to trigger. That could be cool. At the very least, you could also do this during your opponent's end phase, let's say. So let's say you summon out one of, let's say you go with like Polar right up here. You summon out Polar, and then you're able to then search for Megapola, and then you can bring out Megapola, and then that way you're able to pop your opponent's back row before they actually proceed to their end phase. That's really interesting. Very, very interesting sort of interaction here. Next up, we have Bearcti Megatannis, level 8 Water Beast Warrior tuner effect monster, 2400 attack, 700 defense. The stats on these are way better, so it seems like these are the more offensive focused ones, at least the level 8s are. You can only use each effect once per turn. Same clause as before to be able to summon it, and if this card is special summoned while you control another Bearcti monster, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls, change it to face-down defense position. Okay, so this is actually a Book of Moon now. Interesting. So now we actually have a way to stop our opponent from Xyz summoning, to stop our opponent from Link summoning, to stop our opponent, hell, from even Synchro summoning. Book of Moon sort of effects are very, very strong. It does target, but so does Book of Moon, and people play it. This is very, very nice. Both of these do require you to have a Bearcti monster, but honestly, they seem pretty easy to summon, so it's not really that big of a deal. Let's move on to the next card here, which is Bearcti Megabillis. So it's another level 8 Water Beast Warrior tuner effect monster, 2800 attack, big stats on this one, 700 defense. You can only use each effect once per turn. During the main phase, quick effect, same thing as before to summon it. If this card is special summoned while you control another Bearcti monster, you can target one card in your opponent's graveyard, banish it. Oh, okay. So now we have a DD Crow sort of effect, but this one is on a 2800 attack body. And again, remember, these are all quick effects. So there could be some sort of universe where you are actually able to summon multiple of these and really disrupt your opponent. This deck is like all hand traps. And you know what? Now that I think about it, the way that these all special summon themselves out to the field, maybe not in the quick effect sense, but this kind of reminds me of like Drytron to a degree, right? This is like Synchro Drytron so far. We haven't even got to the Synchro cards yet, but the way that these cards are just so easily able to special summon themselves, and even the art style is just reminiscent of Drytron. I don't know, it's interesting. But all three of the big level 8s are able to not actually generate you advantage, but they actually take advantage away from the opponent. So that's something to keep in mind, that you're not going to be actually getting any advantage off of these, but the fact you can disrupt your opponent is actually pretty nice. Let's see what else we've got here. Oh, this is a big one. This is the level 1 Synchro monster that they previewed for us, and we didn't know the effect, and people were freaking out because just inherently a level 1 Synchro monster seems broken. Let's see if that's the case. So this is Bearcti Polari. It's a level 1 Water Beast Synchro effect monster, 700 attack, 1000 defense. Cannot be Synchro summoned. Must be special summoned from your extra deck by sending a tuner and a non-tuner you control whose levels differ by 1 to the graveyard. Interesting. So You don't necessarily need to have both of the Bearcti monsters to do this, although they are 8 and 7 and they are tuner and non-tuner respectively. But the thing is, it doesn't say you have to use Bearcti monsters. You could just have a, for instance, level 1 tuner and a level 2 non-tuner, and you're able to go into this, so that could potentially make this a little bit easier to summon, so you don't have to waste the Bearcti monsters to do it. Interesting. You can only use each effect once per turn. If this card is special summoned, you can activate one Bearcti Big Dipper directly from your deck. Is this just Balinks? Like, does this just get the field spell? Because if that's so, that just might be lackluster. You contribute one level 7 or higher monster added to your hand, or special summon one Bearcti monster from your graveyard. Okay, so that's not bad. I mean, that seems like kind of fair because you require multiple cards to make this. You get the advantage back in the form of the Big Dipper, so you've broken even at this point, but then you contribute a level 7 or higher to special summon a Bearcti monster from your graveyard that will trigger any of their effects because they just have to be special summoned, so you would get some extra value there, and that potentially does net you a plus because then if you get like Polari, you can add a card. If you get one of the 8s, you can then pop a card your opponent controls or something like that. There are some ways that you could actually ultimately generate advantage off of this card, but the effects are once per turn, so it's not like you can do it multiple times. We'll have to see what Big Dipper does, but this is probably going to be part of the heart and soul of this deck, I can imagine. Oh, here we go. Here is the giant mech guy that we saw at the beginning. I really wanted to see what this card did. So this is Bearcti Septon Tryon. It is a level 7 water beast warrior synchro effect monster, 3000 attack, 700 defense, cannot be synchro summoned, must be special summoned from your extra deck by sending a level 8 or higher tuner and one non-tuner synchro monster you control whose levels differ by 7 to the graveyard. Oh, okay. So that means you can summon this with Polari and any of the level 8 tuners. There's probably some other ways to cheat this out, but this seems to be like the most logical way to do it. If anything, you'd want to like maybe gimmick this out and then just summon one of the 8s and go into this guy. I think that might make more sense, but we'll see. Another thing to note here is that it says they can't be synchro summoned, which means that if these cards are destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you're not going to be able to revive them back in any way. And that's just kind of unfortunate because it just makes these cards seem a little bit more fair than they should be. But I digress. Let's go ahead and see what the rest of the card says. You can only use this card's second effect once per turn. The effects of all face-up monsters special summoned from the extra deck that have no level are negated. Oh, wow. Okay, wait a minute. So that means that while this is up, no Link monsters can activate their effects. No Xyz monsters can activate their effects. Interestingly enough, fusion monsters can still activate their effects. So against a deck that's Xyz or linked focus, that could just completely win the game by itself. Who knows? If your opponent special summons a monster or monsters, you can add one Bearcti card from your deck to your hand. This is Bearcti card, so that means these spells and traps count as well. And that's a once per turn, so you don't get multiple cards, but it's a way to get some of the advantage back at the very least. So, and you're almost going to be guaranteed to get that, I would say, in a competitive format. So if there's a reason to play this card, it's this effect right here. I feel like this is going to be meta dependent depending on what decks are good at the time, because if there's no Link or Xyz focused deck, then this card really isn't that good. However, if that's all the meta's playing, then this card is going to be nuts. Let's go ahead and see what else we've got. Oh, we've got another synchro. This is Bearcti Grand Chariot, level 7 water beast warrior synchro effect monster, 2700 attack, 700 defense, cannot be synchro summoned, must be special summoned from your extra deck by sending a level 8 or higher tuner and a non-tuner synchro monster you control whose levels differ by 7 to the graveyard. Okay, so it's the same as the other one. If this card is special summoned, you can target up to 2 other cards on the field, destroy them. Okay, that's not bad. That's actually pretty good. And then once per turn, when a card or effect is activated that targets a Bearcti card you control, quick effect, you contribute a monster from your hand or field, negate the activation. That's actually pretty good. I mean, the fact you contribute from your hand is nice because you don't need to maintain the monsters on the field. Additionally, popping 2 cards is nice. Now, obviously, targeting and destroying are some of the weakest keywords in Yu-Gi-Oh! But to be fair, depending on the circumstances, popping cards can be super strong. Now, the biggest problem that I see with this is there isn't really like a formula synchron quick synchro sort of effect here, so you can't like do this during the opponent's turn. If there's a way to do that, then this card becomes exponentially stronger. But until then, I think this card is like fine. There's probably some better cards you can make. Let's go ahead and move on to the field spell. Okay, Bearcti Big Dipper. So it is a field spell. Once per turn, if you attribute a monster to activate a Bearcti monster's effect, you can banish a level 7 or higher Bearcti monster from your graveyard instead. Interesting. So it allows you to sort of mitigate the cost. That's not too bad. Each time a monster is special summoned, place 1 counter on this card. Okay. okay? Once per turn, if a monster is special summoned, you can remove all counters from this card, minimum of 7, then target one monster your opponent controls. Take control of it. You can only activate this effect while there's a Bearcti Synchro monster on the field. That's super, super conditional. Like, it's cool, but you do need to have 7 counters on this card, which, to be fair, a lot of special summoning happens in Yu-Gi-Oh! So maybe that's not unrealistic to happen. You need to have the Synchro monster on the field as well. This needs to have the right number of counters. The level 1 can search it, which is nice, but I don't know how I feel about this. If anything, like, the first part of this effect is probably, like, at least it seems to be like the best part, but even then it's kind of whatever. I mean, it is nice to mitigate some costs, especially since you can basically get this card for free anyway. But I mean, it does seem like a lot of setup just to get this, but if you can get it, being able to take your opponent's monster is actually pretty strong. So this could be good. It just really depends on how the deck is able to special summon and get these cards out, because you have to think, you've already special summoned multiple times before you even get to the level 1, before you even get to the field spell in the first place. So that's already like 3 or 4 summons gone. I'm not 100% sure about that one. Moving on, though, we have Bearcti Slider quick play spell. You can only activate this once per turn. Target one of your Bearcti monsters that is banished during your graveyard. You cannot special summon for the rest of this turn after this resolves, except monsters that have a level. Also special summon that target, but it cannot attack directly, and also destroy it during the end phase. So what's nice about this is that this also targets the banished ones. So if you banish them for the effect of the field spell, you are still able to get them back. Now, one of the biggest problems here is that you don't actually synchro summon these monsters. So because of that, I'm pretty sure you're not able to actually special summon them off of the effect of Slider, and that really hurts. Like, being able to actually continuously resurrect the big guy would have actually been probably a very unfair thing and would have actually made this deck even more competitive, but unfortunately that's not the case. You're able to get anything back, so if you tribute one of your monsters to bring out a Bearcti, you can then use this to, like, summon it back. So that's a nice way to get some field presence. It allows you to set up for the level 1 synchro a lot easier, or the level 7 for that matter. But I mean, you would run this. There's no reason you wouldn't. It's just Monster Reborn with upside, so I think that's fine. And then next up is a trap card, Bearcti Quint Charge. So it's a continuous trap. Once per turn, you can pay 700 life points to activate one of these effects. You can add a Bearcti monster from your graveyard to your hand. That's pretty good for, like, the end phase. We've seen with cards such as Spiral Mission Rescue how good this sort of effect can be. And then tribute 2 Bearcti monsters. And if you do, special summon a Bearcti monster from your extra deck whose levels equal the difference between those monsters' level, ignoring its summoning conditions. Interesting. Okay, so this is a way then to be able to go into the Grand Chariot during your opponent's turn and actually be able to pop a couple of cards. So that's pretty nice. And then the other effect is when your Bearcti Synchro monster is destroyed by battle with an opponent attacking monster, you can have your opponent shuffle cards from their hand, field, and graveyard into the deck until they have a total of 7. That's a really weird effect. So it is conditional, right? Because it requires your Synchro monster, specifically Bearcti Synchro monster on top of that, to be destroyed by battle from the opponent's attacking monster. So you can't even, like, crash your own thing into it. It doesn't target, it doesn't destroy. So if they're in a situation where they have, let's say they have a full, hand of cards, but then they also have a full graveyard, they're going to have to shuffle a bunch of those cards from their graveyard back into their deck, or some combination of them, until they only have 7 in total. Same goes for the field. So let's say they have like 4 or 5 cards on the field, maybe 4 cards in hand. That's like 8 or 9 cards, and then they're going to have some in their graveyard, so that puts them at, like, 13, 14, 15. The problem is they could just shuffle everything from the graveyard back into the deck, but if they're a graveyard reliant deck, they may not want to do that. This is a very interesting effect. This is a very unexplored sort of effect that we've really never seen in Yu-Gi-Oh! Before, and I'm very curious how good this is. Initially, I don't think this is that good. The fact that it doesn't target or destroy is nice, but 7 is a lot. Like, 7 is basically what you'd see on most boards, and I think most of the time this isn't going to be strong enough, but the fact that this does allow you to Synchro Summon during the opponent's turn, essentially, to be able to get into stuff like Grand Chariot is nice. I mean, maybe you would play this and you can search it, so I mean, I guess it's not the end of the world. It's interesting, though. It's very, very interesting. Overall, I am very fascinated with this archetype. I think there's a lot of potential here. This archetype can pump out a lot of special summons, and I think that's what has my attention the most here. Anytime an archetype can do that, you really have to respect it. And yes, it does lock you into monsters that have levels. However, that isn't the end of the world necessarily, and the fact that the big payoff is a boss monster that locks out the ability to use the effects of Link monsters or Xyz monsters, that's huge. It's very meta dependent because it depends on what other decks are good at the time, but this deck's existence could potentially make it difficult for other decks to be played, and this could be a deck that people would deviate towards. That'd be very interesting to see how that plays out, and remember, you can still use some of those effects prior to using the Bearcti monster's effects, so there could be some potential here to use stuff like Crystron Halki Fibrax, as long as you do that prior to summoning any of the Bearcti monsters. I also noticed that a majority of these cards are level 7 and level 8, so Sacred Sword of 7 stars and Trade-In could add a huge level of consistency to these decks, although to be fair, Ash Blossom is running around, so maybe that's not the best idea, but the fact that you have potentially 6 draw cards already before you even start adding cards like Potted Desires and the like, that's pretty big. And there's also plenty of other powerful synchros you can incorporate into this deck as well. It doesn't lock you into like a specific attribute like water, so you could play Borreload Savage Dragon in this deck. Imagine if your turn 1 board is something like the big guy as well as Borreload Savage Dragon. Savage Dragon can then protect the big guy to ensure that your opponent's not going to do anything with any other sort of effect to be able to get out of that lock from Xyz and Lynx. That could be huge. You also have Herald of the Arclight. If anything, 2020 showed us how strong synchros can still be when it comes to decks like Adamancipator and Infernoble Knight, and synchros are still a force to be reckoned with. So this could just be the synchro deck of 2021, and I am very curious to see how this deck pans out. I think there's a lot of potential for this deck here, and I can't wait to see what people come up with. So guys, that's going to do it for me. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think, because I would really love to hear your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video informative, consider supporting me on Patreon and receive exclusive 1-day early access to every episode of the Yu-Gi-Oh Progression series and the history of Yu-Gi-Oh. Thank you guys so much for watching the video, and we will see you next time.